to thank everyone for coming. This is a reading that we've scheduled in honor of the closing of the King Eddy. We have 3 really great writers that are going to read tonight. We have Dan, we have Jonathan, and we have Ruben. That's right. Thank you. All right. I want Dan. Who's going to start off? Where's Ruben? Ruben, you're going to get the ball rolling. I will just introduce, just give another minute or 2 of introduction, but let's start coming up to the front. So we've scheduled this event tonight. This venerable establishment has been sold, and the Freud family will be closing it before it turns this bar over to the new management. This will happen at some point in the next 6 weeks to 8 weeks. So we just wanted, we're trying to have a bunch of events here just to celebrate this great place. And so I called Dan. Dan is a tremendous Los Angeles author and the son of John Fante. John Fante, of course, immortalized this bar in his novel Ask the Dust. A very famous scene in his 1939 novel Ask the Dust. Arturo Bandini, who's of course Charles Bukowski's idol, Arturo Bandini loses all of his money from his first royalty check to a B-girl in the cellar of this place. So Dan was the first person I called. Kim, you gotta watch out. They're schlepping ice. So Ruben is... There you go. Ruben, how would you like to read a short story?
I would ask
Very good. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to get started. We have Ruben Ortega, and he's going to read a couple short stories.
Is the volume as high as it'll go?
No, I'm going to turn... Ruben, why don't you just say a couple sentences, a test, and I'm going to adjust the volume so before you get started. So just take the mic and just say hello and introduce yourself, and I'll get the volume bumped up.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Can you hear me out there?
No.
No?
Hello. Pump it up, Ruben. I'm going to pump it up. Okay.
Oh, can you hear me out there?
Yep.
I can hear myself. Hello. Can I reach everybody?
Go ahead, keep saying it.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. I like to refer to my work as autobiographical fiction. Some of it is made up, and a lot of it I take it from real life experiences. So as soon as we get this straightened out, I'll start on my first story, which is called The Bum on a Bike. Okay, are you ready? Okay, here we go. It's called A Bike Ride, The Bum on a Bike. Here we go. God told me to ride my bike east on Wilshire. I learned a long time ago not to argue with God. And don't play cards with him either. I remember once during the Christmas season, I was moved with compassion to give my coat to a homeless person. Later that day, while I was freezing my ass off at a carnival, the opportunity to win a black leather jacket presented itself. It seemed like a good idea to ask God if he would help me win it. And he said, sure. So I bought a raffle ticket with my last dollar and waited for the drawing. When my number failed to turn up, I asked God about it. He said, son, let this be a lesson for you. I'm not your genie in a bottle. Once I asked God to hook me up with a girl that I liked, and he said, sure. After she refused to go out with me, I asked God about it. He said, son, let this be a lesson for you. I am not your pimp daddy. So when God told me to ride my bike east on Wilshire, I knew there was a lesson in it for me somewhere. After pedaling my bike a few blocks, I forgot about God and went to go see a movie. I had an hour to wait before the next show, so I decided to kill some time at the nearest coffee shop. I rode my bike down to this pseudo-European coffee shop, you know, the ones with the tables and chairs outside, and locked up my bike. Some of the patrons out front looked at me kind of weird, like I was a homeless person or something. Anyways, I guess I got self-conscious, because when I got up to go to the front door, I just kept walking by, like I was going to go to the next corner. Maybe I did that because I was by myself and it was a coffee shop that I hadn't been to before. Or maybe I did it because I felt like a bum on a bike. I don't know. I just went back, got my bike, and rode to a restaurant that I'd been to before. Funny how when stuff like that happens to you, you feel like you're still a little kid with insecurities and all. When it was time to go see the movie, I locked up my bike to a concrete light pole next to an alley. I should mention that the lock I use is one of those heavy cable jobs with the locking mechanism built in. I went in and watched one of those Karate Chan movies, which, by the way, turned out to be good. When the movie was over, I went out to unlock my bike. Everything looked normal as it should. Suddenly this woman came running out of nowhere, shaking and yelling like she just had been raped. Something about a crook trying to steal my bike. Since everything looked normal, I thought that maybe she had just overreacted when she seen somebody fooling around with it. She spoke with the Spanish accent like she was from Spain. At least, I like to think she was from Spain. Anyways, she told me she heard this loud banging sound and said she saw some guy messing with my bike. I said that when I saw her, she started to act strange. When he saw her, she started to act strange, so she told him she was going to call the cops. She said she walked up to the security guard that was standing in front of the theater and told him to call the cops. The funny part about this story is that she kept calling him a stupido because she wouldn't do anything about it. The lady then took her by the hand and led her to a dark spot in the alley where the thief had tried to conceal a huge monkey wrench that looked like it was used for removing giant bolts off the San Francisco Bridge. When I saw the size of this thing and remembered about the loud clanging noise this woman had heard, I immediately rushed over to check my bike for any signs of damage. Everything looked fine, but upon closer inspection of the cable, I noticed two deep cuts that corresponded to two dents that were chipped into the concrete light pole where the cable rested against it. One of the gashes was so deep it almost cut through. The cable was held together by a couple of strands. It's funny how I felt pissed off, relieved, and bored with this lady telling me all the details of the attempted theft. I decided to take this guy's wrench as punishment for trying to steal my bike. The lady, bless her soul, got all excited when I tried to pick it up. Something about ruining the fingerprints. I didn't have the heart to tell her that the cops don't give a shit about a bike that was almost stolen. I was grateful that she had foiled the attempt of this rotten bastard to try to steal my bike. So to make her happy, I picked up the wrench with a smelly plastic bag that was on the ground. After I rode my bike out of sight, I got rid of the smelly bag. I was holding this heavy damn thing across my handlebars, using them to help me support its weight. Then I had this crazy funny thought. Here I was in the movies, watching this Chan dude karate chop the hell out of the bad guys, while one of the bad guys was karate chopping the hell out of my cable. On my way home, I ran a red light. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was because I felt like a criminal with this big monkey wrench across my handlebars. Halfway through the light, I spotted the cops cruising towards me real slow. I slowed down enough to make it look like I was sorry, and it worked, because they drove right by. Then it occurred to me, what if they would have seen the monkey wrench? I can just see myself showing them the cuts in the cable and the keys to the lock. I rode my bike a few more blocks till I came to a red light. As I was waiting for the light to turn green, a car full of young cruisers drove by real slow. The passenger told me to get the fuck off the street. I had this picture in my mind of that heavy-ass monkey wrench crashing into the windshield and shattering it into 1,000 pieces, and then watch it in slow motion as it crashed into his mouth, shattering his teeth into still smaller pieces. Then I pictured my getaway, ducking in and out of alleys, backyards, until it would have been impossible even for the FBI to find me. Well, I just kind of looked at him the way an old dog does when he's too old to care what a puppy does to him, and crossed the street. You know what? Thinking of all this shit got me talking to God again. I said to him, what in the hell could I possibly learn from all this? And his answer was, I want you to ride your bike eastbound Wilshire. This one is gonna probably date me a little bit.
If you step a little bit over, maybe it won't feedback somewhat.
Move the thing over.
Yeah, let's try that. Because we want people to hear you. Let's see if that's
okay.
Hey, not so bad.
This one is called Sergeant Rock. Nobody cared about Sergeant Rock. Just a moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thank you. This one is called Sergeant Rock. Nobody cared about Sergeant Rock. That wasn't even his name. We just called him that because he acted like the comic book hero. Rock was likable like a stupid dog. Tony wanted to kill him. I didn't think that stupidity warranted the death penalty, but it did get people killed. So we put it to a vote and agreed that a maiming of some sort was in order. Reconnaissance had spotted the Cain were amassing troops in the mountains near Cambodia, a place we called the Arizona Badlands because a lot of men had died there during the Tet Offensive. On the mountains we were climbing, dense watery clouds shaped like dinosaurs devoured the bright landscape and cast an eerie chill over the platoon. The acoustics were haunting, as if the sound only existed in our imaginations. Slippery boulders splattered with black fuzzy lichen looked and felt like giant monstrous tarantulas. Men would lose their footing on these and collapse into stringless marionettes, banging their way down the slope until some desultory rock formation would terminate the brutal punishment. James Wagner, the radioman and my best friend, was in front of me when he fell. He crashed down the mountain, his flesh and radio echoing in the still dimness like a muted percussionist hammering out a dirge, and he never uttered a sound. What a tough bastard he is, I thought. He came to rest on a flat rock overlooking the valley. A ray of light swept out from underneath the skirt of a cloud and broke out on him. It made Wagner look luminous, as if he were a shining example of how men were supposed to comport themselves in adversity. He sat there for a minute, shook his head, and then yelled, "Who in the fuck do they think I am? Jungle Jim?" His voice boomed off the mountain like some Shakespearean actor auditioning for a part. He calmly stood up, took off the radio, and flung it into the ground. "Fuck it," he said, "I'm going on strike." It took us over an hour to coax him off that damn rock. In a few days, we were near the top of the mountain and felt dirty, tired, and hungry. About noon, the sun burned through the clouds and turned everything to steam. Rock was being his usual asshole self by stalling lunch and pushing us to the limits of our endurance. So when he told us to keep climbing, we told him to get fucked. He looked at us with those big, blue, stupid eyes and said, "Come on, man, we can do this." He set his square jaw like flint, took a machete from the point man, and zealously hacked his way up the mountain. We all sat down, lit cigarettes, and laughed. After 10 minutes of lashing away at the elephant grass, he passed out from heat exhaustion. Now everybody was pissed off because we had to clear our LZ to medevac his lame ass out. We racked away at those weeds for hours, and by the time the chopper arrived, we were really pissed off. The wallop from the chopper blades kicked up loose foliage into our faces and added to the sting of resentment we already felt collectively towards Rock. Powerful hydraulic pumps lowered the chopper's rear door and served as a ramp for transporting troops. My squad was chosen to carry Rock aboard. We laid the unconscious Rock inside the door next to where the open seam of the ramp was and turned to leave. When I noticed that Tony lingered behind, I pretended to walk off with the rest of the squad, and then I doubled back to see what he was up to. Tony climbed up the ramp and yelled to the pilot to take off. Just as the pilot started to close the door, Tony reached in and pulled out his leg so that Rock's leg would get smashed by the heavy door. I wanted to say something, to tell Tony that this wasn't right, but the words wouldn't come. It just sort of got stuck in my chest, along with everything else I had seen in the war and knew wasn't right.
Yeah, right.
there?
Yeah.
This one is called the court. The sun cracked in through the window shade and struck him squarely on the face, signaling the start of another day. He lay motionless for a few minutes, trying to gather his thoughts, while off in the distance he could hear the unmistakable sound of a tennis ball being hit on the court. He leaned over to pick out the window and tried his best to avoid the woman lying next to him. "What time is it?" she asked, when she suddenly felt the heat of his body disappear. 6:20, he said softly. "What are they doing out there this early in the morning?" she said. "Don't they have a life?" He didn't respond for a few moments and just sat there and stared at two men who were busy hitting practice volleys on the court. "It looks like Bob and Roger," he said. "Old Bob's backhand sure is improving." "His backhand may be improving," she said, "but his marriage is deteriorating." His marriage is beyond deterioration. As a matter of fact, his marriage was dead. His divorce had been finalized yesterday morning and was celebrated on the court on that same night. When Roger's wife heard about the divorce, she told Bob how sorry she was to hear the bad news. Bob just looked at her with disbelief and said, "Are you kidding? That's great fucking news." Thought about telling her the divorce, but decided to use the bathroom instead. He saw the tennis racket lying on the top of the dresser and thought about picking it up so that he could feel its weight and balance in the grip of his hand, but decided against it when he felt the presence of cold striking on his back. "You know, it's my mother's birthday today. I told her we'd be there early so I could help her with the cooking." His mind went blank for a second, then the heat of anger bubbled up inside of him. He felt like a kid who was told that he couldn't go out to play. "What time do we have to be there?" he said with a tinge of insolence. "I told her we'd be there by noon, so I thought that we could leave by around 11 o'clock. "Good," he said to himself in the mirror. "Maybe I can get 3 or 4 sets in by then." "What was that, honey?" she said, standing at the door now and giving him an inquisitive look. "I said that maybe I could get 3 or 4 games in by then." "Why even bother with 3 or 4 games? Why don't you just make it all damn day like you always do?" He saw that she was on the verge of tears, and he hated her for that. How could she play dirty so early on in the game? He walked over to give her a hug. A hug always worked, but not this time. She pushed him away and said, "Go play with your friends, but don't expect me to be here when you get back. Go play with your friends." He repeated with indignation and then struggled for something to say, but he had nothing. She was a good wife, he thought to himself. Not perfect. A perfect wife would have let him play with the boys. "Come on, sweetheart, don't do this. What a difference does it make if I play a couple of sets? You know that I'll be back before it's time to leave." "I know you will," she said, "but that's not the point." "What is the point?" he asked, knowing full well what it was. "The point," she said, with growing resolve in her voice, "is that you spend all your damn time on that court. We don't have a life together anymore. All you care about is playing tennis with your friends." "It's not like I'm out at the bars or anything like that," he said in his defense. "You can see me from the window, for Christ's sakes." "It's not the same," she said proudly. "Every week it's the same thing. You come home from work, eat dinner, and then go out there and play tennis until midnight. And then on the weekends, it's tennis from 6 in the morning to 2 in the morning. That's too much. I can't take it anymore." She was right. He knew she was right. But what could he do? Maybe there was a 12-step program for this kind that he could join, but then dismissed the thought as soon as he realized how ridiculous it sounded. There was no way of getting around it. He had a problem. The ball was in his court, and it had plenty of pace. Love. Love is a word that's used in tennis when you have absolutely nothing. He knew that in this context it did not apply to her. He loved her. Loved her enough to give up playing tennis. At least for the day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Those are a great crowd. Thank you.
Great, Ruben. Thank you.
Hello. Let's show some respect for the great Ruben Ortega.
All right. Thank you, everybody. You're kind. Thank you.
can read in this place, man. You can read anywhere.
That's your son. Let me get to it.
Well, I've been told that Charles Bukowski used to drink in this dump. And I drank in a lot of dumps, too. And Bukowski was a good friend of mine. Probably, you know, my first real mentor. And this is a story. It's a chapter that's excerpted from my book. And it's about my first meeting with Bukowski. I trudged along the smoggy streets of East Hollywood, feeling like some crazed, purposeful pilgrim on a holy mission. Near the intersection by the great man's place, I came to a seedy, desolate stretch of the boulevard, peopled by heat-crazed beggars and winos. Everywhere I looked, sweaty $2 whores with melting lipstick and runny mascara lingered in greasy shadows of despair. A nondescript stench of welfare ruin and human decay hung heavy in the air. Everything seemed to have suddenly sprung full-blown right out of one of his stories. It was pure poetry. I stopped at the little corner liquor store and bought a couple of six-packs and a pint of cheap whiskey. Better to not go meet a living literary legend empty-handed. Supplies in hand, I walked up the cracked, weedy sidewalk, past rows of run-down wooden houses with faded, crumbling facades. Rusty shopping carts vied for space, with stripped-down engineless cars rotting away on dried-up, dirt-bound lawns, peppered with ancient cigarette stubs. Rusty beer cans and discarded short dogs with peeling, sun-bleached labels littered the desolate, weedy yards. I checked the paper in my hand. This was the place, all right. I walked up into one of those ratty little alleys the Hollywood slumlords call courtyards and stopped before an anonymous little bungalow, all the way down in the back on the right. I could feel butterflies in my stomach, or maybe they were cockroaches. I peered through a window to see a shadowy figure moving around inside. Fuck, it was him. My literary hero was a bear of a man, dressed for comfort in a wife-beater and a pair of boxer shorts. He was sitting in a cramped breakfast nook beside the window. His nicotine-stained fingers pounded away at an old Royal typewriter. Classical music played from a little plastic radio sitting on the counter beside an empty whiskey bottle. He seemed to be moving his scarred, oversized head in a strange rhythm to the music as he wrote, like a prize fighter bobbing and weaving in motions so subtle only the spirits of his poetry could touch him. I stood at the window like a peeping Tom, paralyzed. He stopped typing to fish a half-smoked cigar out of an overflowing ashtray, surrounded by a dozen empty beer bottles. I watched him shove the stub into his battered junkyard face, light it, then resume his work. This was it, now or never. I turned away from the window and gave a timid little tap on the door. "Go away!" the big man growled, still pounding away at his typewriter. Several short raps on the kitchen window right beside him finally got Bukowski's attention. "Who are you? What do you want?" He shouted in a weary W.C. Fields-like drawl without looking up from his work. Hey, sorry to bother you," I said to the window. I write for the Free Press." Bukowski mumbled something under his breath. I stood there on the dirty concrete porch, waiting. Nothing. Finally, I talked to the window again, playing my last card. "I got some beers and a bottle." Bukowski seemed like he wanted to say something. Then he stopped, editing himself. He surveyed the empty beer bottles standing like little ghosts around his typewriter. "Yeah, all right," he called out. Just hold on a minute. He pounded out a last line on the typewriter, then grabbed a dirty kitchen towel off the counter, threw it over his work, and rose to his feet. The big man stepped into a pair of slippers and slouched across the little living room. Awkward as a schoolboy on a first date, I stood by the tattered screen door and waited. And waited. Looking down at a dirty gray cement landing, hallowed ground, no welcome mat. I shifted my weight from foot to foot, holding the heavy case of beer like a temple offering. It felt cold in my hands in the warm late summer breeze. I breathed in a colorful scent of cat piss and night-blooming jasmine. The sound of classical music played on behind the kitchen window, blending with the baby's cries, and a television blaring across the courtyard. What sounded like a gunshot popped somewhere off in the distance. The door lurched open and Bukowski's big battered face was there, sizing me up. I was standing in the presence of genius, and it looked like it was about to knock me on my ass. Bukowski reached into a cardboard box and extracted a can of beer. He cracked it open. Without a backward glance, he turned and disappeared back into the dark. I stood there, my eyes scanning the cracked cement landing. My brown leather boots, the frayed cuffs of my dirty jeans. Jesus, kid, the big man's voice drawled. You're just gonna stand around out there? Come on, bring it inside. I snapped out of it and stepped over the threshold. I was in. The great writer looked up and gestured for me to sit. Hours later, half drunk, I'm sitting across from Bukowski at a cheap little coffee table, littered with empty cans. An empty pint bottle of whiskey sits on his end like a captured queen in a chess match. A pile of my hyperactive speed freak poetry sitting unread on the table between us. I reached into the empty cardboard box and cracked open the last can of beer. Hey, give me that, Bukowski protested as I took a swig. So you're a writer, huh? He said. I looked at him and passed the half-finished can over. Bukowski guzzled it down and burped. An awkward silence. Well, Bukowski drawled at last, looking suddenly drunk and very nasty. If you're a writer, then what you do is write. Get it? What you don't do is sit around talking about writing with other guys who write. You write, and then you write some more. That's it, baby. Silence. But if you got nothing to write about, he went on, then you're probably just another bum with a $10 typer and a lot of big talk and dog shit for brains. And to be quite honest, kid, you impress me as a self-conscious punk who needs to go out and do some fucking living. Who the fuck you calling a punk, you old fart? I heard myself say, instantly regretting it. You little cunt-licking fish-lipped mama's boy! Punk! 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 Too late. Fuck this shit. Motherfucker, I snarled, rising to my feet fast, knocking the empty beer cans off the table. Yeah, that's right, baby. I fucked your mother, and I'm gonna fuck you too, you little fish fucker. Bukowski taunted, lunging at me like a freight train. Drunk and crazed, I took a wild swing. I felt my fist connect with the rough, bearded skin of Bukowski's face. Not fazed, he clobbered me on the ear. Shit, I was seeing stars. Before I knew what was happening, we were duking it out in the middle of his living room. I could taste blood in my mouth from where he nailed me again. And I just kept hitting back. Bukowski was getting the best of me, though, pounding away like a demented ape with those ugly red mitts. I crouched low, defending my head. I tried to headbutt him in his ample gut, but the old bastard grabbed me like a bear. We both wrestled to the floor, toppling over the coffee table. It cracked and splintered, and there we were, the two of us, a pair of drunken poets, rolling around on that dirty wall-to-wall carpet in a spinning chaos of beer cans and pages of poetry flying, pissed and crazed and gasping like some savage lumbering beast of old. An ugly, deformed, drunken puppet destroying everything in its path. Breathing hard, bloody and sweating, finally we stopped. Bukowski started to laugh. Jeez, kid, you fight like a girl I used to fuck in a toilet. Was that before or after she shit in her mouth? The kid snaps back. Shit! I shit bigger than you, baby. Look at my beautiful coffee table. You owe me for that, you little turd. I trudged back up to the liquor store on the corner, eager to make good my first debt to Charles Bukowski. I didn't know it then, but it wouldn't be my last. We spent the rest of the night sitting on his floor amidst the rubble and wreckage of our first meeting, drinking, trading insults, reading poetry, and repeatedly toasting to each other's speedy demise. Finally, the sun came up through his dirty windows, emerging like a punch-drunk, dusty old sea monster from the smoggy purgatory of Charles Bukowski's doomed and beloved City of the Angels. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, here's a short one. Dan is mad at me because I'm reading off a BlackBerry. What he doesn't understand is that I wrote this shit on a BlackBerry. Last minute edits and all. What am I going to read? Here's a short one. Something of a journal entry. 2 a.m. Saturday night, Buenos Aires. Lost in a rancid late-night whirlwind of saggy asses and rock-hard smiles. My gringo friend is still upstairs with a fabulous young hooker, shaking up the night. For me, the tired old pussy parade was running out of fun. Tired of the sad old games and lopsided insecurities of the night, I decided to go for a ride. But I lost my eager young cab driver somewhere in the horny crowds, and ended up back in the whorehouse with the gringo again. 4 a.m. As the gringo and I waited for the red lady to appear, we spoke of God and divine manifestation. Surrounded by butt-ugly old fuck monkeys, a cold wind blew in the door, and distant lightning cracked across the sky outside. Water armies marching across the legendary pampas of old Argentina. The gringo said, "Let's go," and off we went, just as the first drops began to fall. The black interior of the taxi engulfing lost conversations. There was a rush of neon this and traffic that. And we soon emerged at the next place like happy kids at summer picnics past at World's End. But there's a spirit of trouble and betrayal that follows me like a persistent, vicious dog. I don't want it around, but betrayal is what it is. It curls up to rest at my feet, dreaming of revenge and destruction. I throw the scrap from time to time, just to keep it from rising up, fangs flashing as I dream of apocalypse teachings yet to be revealed. The jukebox blasts out new and old memories, and the lights flicker on and off, and the girls come and go, and the night unfolds like a mutant metal flower, telling me all I need to know now. I think a good old cheap Buenos Aires cheddar bun sandwich would go down pretty well about now. But I'm still waiting for a certain girl. Finally, her older sister comes and sits beside me. Another kiss on another soft brown cheek, and then she's gone. And now another one comes by and smiles. I really like this place. An easy new purgatory to inhabit as flying saucer spirits gather in silence across the world to wipe the slate clean of all harsh judgments and weak-hearted unbelievers with names whose power rings no bells and whistles in higher realms of mind and vision. Finally, I go upstairs for another round with the chubby girl with sparkly eyes, an easy laugh, and a peace sign crudely tattooed on her upper arm. Her black hair flows like a waterfall of crow's wings. Aquarius. Her name? Jasmine. I remember. Jasmine. Nice name. Nice girl. 5 a.m. Back in the bar. I get my pen and book out and start to write again. I'm on reel number 2, waiting for number 3. Skinny little thing with a legendary face. Abril. But she's out the door on her way home now to try to beat the dawn. I ask her if tomorrow she'll be in. Yes, she says, with a sweet smile to melt my heart with crooked pirate eyes. Yes, she's the one. Another one. I sit back down and keep writing. Gotta remember all these girls in my prayers, these fleeting whorehouse angels who bring me such pleasure and passion and appreciation for mi vida loca. Gotta remember each and all. It seems so important. Maybe I'll remember why someday. We'll all meet again. That's why. That's what I told the blonde one whose mother had just died. That she'd meet her again. Maybe that's why she came up to me. Because she knew I told her the truth. After all, a man sitting in a Buenos Aires whorehouse at 5 a.m. writing poems in a little book can never tell a lie. Everybody knows that. Thank you very much. Okay, here's a crowd pleaser. This is from my book Narcissa. It's this chapter, well, he's gone and fallen in love with a demented crack whore. Further away, like that. I'm competing with mobs of drunken heathens, shit-eaters, piss drinkers. Okay. Oh, okay. By the DVD.
We resemble that, really.
Okay. Anyway, so he's gone and fallen in love with a teenage crack whore, and they're on the ride to hell together. He's been trying to sleep. She smokes a lot of crack, and he doesn't get any sleep because she's always going. So he finally has fallen asleep, and he's woken up. And here it is. I don't know how long I was out. Everything that happened next was a blur. I was suddenly awake. I felt that creepy death house chill. I cracked my eyes in that foggy state where you don't know what day it is or if it's even day or night. Feeling totally disoriented. Coming to slowly. Some strange sound. What the fuck's going on here? I looked up and saw Narcissa's face hovering over me in the bed like a bad acid hallucination. I blinked and rubbed my puffy eyes. I looked again. It was really her. But there was something about her look, something stranger than usual, her eyes. Fuck. It gave me a chill right down to my core. She just sat there staring at me with this goofy, distant look on her face, making these constipated little choking noises. A sudden cold wave of panic froze my gut. What the fucking fuck? Oh God, no, she's having a fucking overdose. Jesus, she's finally done it now. Any second she'll be foaming in the mouth, bleeding from those big bugged-out eyes, flipping around on my bed like a fucking hooked trout. Oh God, no, shit. I sat up fast and shook her by the shoulders. Baby, baby, what's wrong? Talk to me. Narcissa, say something. Narcissa said nothing. She just sat there making these little noises like a sick cat choking on a hairball. Oh God! Then she edged over me, moving her face over my chest, as if she was going to tell me something really important. Oh God, please make her be all right. Please, God. I moved closer so as not to miss her dying last words. Suddenly, a big gushing geyser flew out of her mouth, bathing me in vomit. A warm shower of beans and rice and Coca-Cola and half-digested pizza from the day before yesterday. Fuck! Chocolate-covered puke all spewing over me. Jesus! Covering me like a hard shower spray. Fuck! Paralyzed, I watched in mute, creeping horror as she cocked that gaping, toxic blowhole open like the gates of hell. She let it fly again. Splash! Where does such a skinny little freak keep so much fucking food and liquid waste? Fuck, dear God! A round little green pea rolled down a slimy trail right into my belly button. Jesus, look at this shit, a pea. And it's perfectly intact. There's another one. And here's a fucking baby carrot now. Christ and a shish kebab. This crazy bitch swallows down small legumes whole. Too fucking impatient and hyperactive to even chew. Oh God, what the fucking fuck? Bits of white rice everywhere here. Crawling maggots. What the fuck is this shit? Oh God, what if she's infested with internal larvae? Oh God, no, please, no. It's rice, it has to be rice. What's next? Narcissa turned and rose up from the bed. She slithered and slapped across the room as if nothing had even happened, dripping a slimy vomit trail. Flap, 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 across the floor behind her. Are you completely insane? I yelled, suddenly wide awake, realizing the full horror of it all. I rose up from the bed. Vomit slid down my torso, flap, onto the floor as I searched desperately for a towel, cursing her under my breath. Narcissa looked right through me as if I wasn't even there. I lost it. The bathroom is over there, Narcissa, I shouted, pointing my finger at the door. She just stared into space. Jesus, Narcissa, I yelled. You avoid the fucking bed like it's an open grave, a fucking snake pit. You stay holed up for days in the fucking bathroom, but now you're gonna come and puke all over me? Why? That's not a goodnight kiss, you fucking crazy bitch. Thanks a lot. Jesus. Fuck. She continued to stare off blankly. Why, Narcissa, I cried. Just tell me, okay? Why do I deserve this shit? Why? I would prove it, Sugano. Her glazed expression of childlike sincerity failed to melt my heart. Yeah, right, I spat. Narcissa stood there looking at me with that same innocent blank look on her face. She seemed to be feeling better now, at least. Suddenly she'd become all cheerful and perky, lighter after a good healthy purge. She casually strolled over and turned up the boombox. Then she started dancing, gliding around the room, moving her feet around, spreading the stinking trail of puke far and wide as I desperately tried to wipe it up. It was a losing battle. Finally, I just stopped and stood there, staring at her. "What the fuck are you doing, you little psychopath?" I cried in anguish, throwing down the towel. "I'm dancing, Cigano." I felt like slitting my throat. Narcissa had really outdone herself this time. Please, let's show some respect for the great John Fante.
My name's Dan. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I want to thank Richard and Kim and Esoteric Tours and the King Eddy for letting us come here tonight and do this. And I want to thank you for coming here tonight. So I'm going to read some stuff. I think I'll read a couple of poems. Again, let's again for Jonathan Shaw and Ruben Ortega. Partners in crime. Here's a poem from my mother. Today at the home, I read her some of my new stuff while she squinted at me, straining to hear my savvy mouth sputtering out chainsaw syllables beneath those perfect and unspoiled steel gray eyes. This ancient ex-editor who's read more and knows more about writing and poetry than I'll ever hope to know. 5 minutes into it, I looked up. I said, "Well, what do you think, Ma?" She seemed distracted. 10,000 brow wrinkles came, flattened out, then returned. "Do you still have that phone sales job?" she said. "No, Ma, I don't have a day gig anymore. Writing is all I do now." "Well, get one for Christ's sake," she said, "and help me up. I need to get to the bathroom." My father used to drink in this bar, and it was a long time ago, probably 1931 or 32, and so I'm going to dedicate this poem to the King Eddy and to John Fante. Half drunk and a fool at 1 a.m. at the King Eddy Saloon. Somehow sitting back down on my way from the jukebox, my face brushed your hair and puzzled your perfume. And I said hi, and you and your girlfriend Ginger both smiled back and we talked. And then you put on and then you said you were cold, so you put on your fake leopard coat before you went to the ladies' room, and not knowing why for sure, I stole your keys off the bar. And I made a secret hidden game in my hand of trying to guess which one went to what door. Then I tasted them, rubbing my tongue over each one. And you and your Ginger sipping your margaritas and talking about breast augmentation and upgrading your jobs and moving to fucking San Diego. And when the time was right, I leaned over and whispered something like, "I like your tits," and went for a kiss. Because see, if I didn't get one, I'd be way ahead anyway, because you'll be calling a locksmith in half an hour, and me, all the way home, I'll be humming a B.B. King love song to myself. For years, I thought that talking to the gods was an exercise done privately, under unforgiving distant stars, ridiculous unrequited prayer done by staring at old cold books with mean small print. But then I discovered that just ain't it at all. God can be found in the thank you voice of the guy at the counter at the 7-Eleven, or the quietness of a stranger's parking lot smile, or the rattle of weeds across a dry summer Mojave, or watching my unfettered fingers jumping across the keys deep in the middle of typing 3 hours worth of unscrubbed truth. God, for me, turned out to be a conscious choice, a self-invoked experience, just like love. Yeah. There's a poem here for John Fante.
Okay.
As soon as Jim Morrison shows up, I'll leave.
Me too.
It'll be another seance in La Cienega.
All right, you still with me?
Yeah!
I'm trying to find this one for my dad. I'm going to try this one. Oh, here we go. Okay, this is for John Fante. Stuck on my novel and wasting time. I drove up Beechwood Canyon in the hills today under the Hollywood sign and felt again how it must have been 70 years ago for my old man Nathaniel West and Fenton and William Faulkner in that pack of overpaid, restless, and disenfranchised screen doctor movie hacks. Looking down through the soot, I said out loud, "Pop, you wanted this, a Spanish mansion on this hill?" And hearing people whisper to your name when you entered Musso's bar, and blowjobs from not-quite actresses after the card game, and too many drinks at the Garden of Allah. And then I reminded myself what you really left behind, carelessly, unintentionally in these greedy hills, could never have been bought or sold. John Fante's gift to me was his pure writer's heart.
Yay, Dan! Yay, Dan! Put him in for King Eddy.
Now that I've written 25 years worth of books and plays and given up booze and cigarettes and filthy, glorious pornography, and my clothes don't stink from sleeping in my old Pontiac all night, and my hair is thinner and I'm 20 pounds too fat and deep in my 60s with return calls to make and responsibilities, and the arguments I have with cops are no longer about bail or unpaid warrants or where I hid my gun. I now feel qualified to testify that time has changed nothing, that this thing that all my life within me has ticked and squirmed, this unfilled hole, this need to yell out and change things and never be satisfied, this voice that has survived shrinks and jails and 3 divorces and suicide and bankruptcy and dozens of self-improvement weekends. This rage still guides my vision and demands that I go head first against my life like a fool in search of a pure white flame.
Whoa.
Couple of more. This is to a guy, a writer I know, who used to send me emails constantly and ask me what my moods were and what was the right mood to write, and you know, does this sentence make sense? And finally I wrote him this poem. Walk with only words and books as your friend. Dream the dreams of deviant dead writer saints who coming before you drowned the pain of their purest heart in vats of gin like a flailing unloved cat. Embrace selfishness and joblessness. Smoke millions of unfiltered cigarettes and glue your ass hopelessly to the evilest drunken crack whore who trade your balls in a New York instant for the guy at the end of the bar with a pitted face and a $50 bill. Do not be courageous. Remember that all men are fools and liars, soulless captives of their own blood-stained necessity. Oh yeah, and forgive nothing. Then maybe one day like me, your feet aching and your head still raw from last night's festivity, you'll kick over a box or turn a page and find yourself face to face with the blurry eyes of God.
Great work.
Thank you very much. One last poem, and then I'm going to read a little something from my newest book. Okay, here we go. I met the meanest bastard starving cat while sitting with a book on a bench smoking half a pack of Luckies at Venice Beach. He saw me and came up, white, filthy, with one green eye and one yellow eye, and a fresh slash on his scarred ear. Angry as a wounded wolf, he kept his distance, and his look said, "Feed me or fuck off. That venture on is my territory." What he didn't know is that I know desperate too and crazy, and what emptiness and aloneness and rage can do to you when you've got nothing but pain in your pockets, and your home is a busted-out 1978 Pontiac stalled in an alley in West LA, and the voice in your mind is carving more of you up and killing more of you off each day, and you wake up and drink more rat-piss wine to keep you from instant madness, and God becomes a guy coming out of the 7-Eleven handing you chump change for another fucking jug, and fear is your finest feeling, and love is dead, and all time is dead, and even your eyes stink, and your gut is bloated with the screaming voices of those you hate, and the only real sanity there is can be found in the small miracle of sucking back one more drink. That mean white cat didn't know that I'd been cut too from the same cloth. The only difference is 25 years in my typewriter.
Yeah.
So here's my commercial. I got some books here. If you're interested in the book, they're all $15. No checks, no credit cards. Now I'm going to read this thing. Does everybody know about a place called Musso and Frank's Grill in Hollywood? My father used to drink there, and he drank there with William Faulkner. He drank there with Dalton Trumbo. He drank there with Frank Fenton. So this is a little snippet out of my newest book. It's called A Family Legacy of Writing, Drinking, and Surviving, Fante, a Memoir. In the early part of his marriage, John Fante and his carousing pals, Kerry McWilliams, Ross Wills, Frank Fenton, Joe Pagano, Al Bazarides, and Jack Leonard were regulars at Musso and Frank's Grill, where many Hollywood writers of the period hung out. Faulkner, Nathaniel West, Raymond Chandler, and Dashiell Hammett were often visitors, and even the reclusive Ed Scott Fitzgerald stopped in from time to time. In 2012, Musso and Frank's Grill lost my pen. In 2012, Musso and Frank's Grill still stands on Hollywood Boulevard, its interior virtually unchanged from how it looked over 90 years ago. Stanley Rose, a big smiling Texan and an ex-bootlegger who always claimed to be illiterate, owned the bookstore next door to Musso and Frank's Grill. And slender Yativ Moss was the bookstore manager. Stanley once said, "Books? I hate fucking books. I only opened this joint to hang out with my pals." Stanley counted Nat West and John Fante as two of his best friends. Across the street and down the block on Las Palmas, late in the 1960s, a renegade LA poet named Charles Bukowski frequented the Baroque bookstore, owned by a guy named Red Stadolski. Buck and Red were great friends. Bukowski knew the history of Musso and Frank's Grill and also spent many an evening between Red's bookstore and Musso's bar, often bending his elbow in homage to a forgotten author named John Fante. Across the street, the Baroque bookstore, where the Baroque bookstore existed, Maselli's restaurant still stands and has for more than 60 years. This area of Hollywood, for years by reputation, attracted writers and artists from across the country. The fact that Musso and Frank's Grill and Maselli still remain in Hollywood today is a tribute to accident and nothing else. In the late 30s, thank you, in the late 30s, drinking and hanging out with his pals at Musso and Frank's Grill became a daily habit for my father. At that time, an incident took place that perfectly describes the Hollywood writer lifestyle of the era. My father's friend, the screenwriter Al Bizzarrides, had been assigned by a studio boss to watch William Faulkner. Faulkner was being paid handsomely to write movies, but his drinking was out of hand, and more frequently he was becoming a no-show on the studio lot. His producer needed someone to escort Faulkner to and from work. Bizzarrides, the junior writer, got the job. One afternoon, Bizzarrides burst into Musso and Frank's in a panic, grabbed John Fante by the shoulder. Faulkner wasn't answering the phone at his bungalow, and it would mean Bizzarrides' ass if he didn't get the little prick to a script conference by 1 o'clock. He desperately needed help and was sure Faulkner was drunk and it would take two guys to sober him up and deliver him to Gower Street. My father agreed to help, and he and Bizzarrides set off to Faulkner's bungalow. When they arrived, a drunken row between William Faulkner and his wife Estelle was in progress. The couple refused to answer the door. Bizzarrides forced a window open and the two men climbed in. Bill was dressed for work, but drunk. Estelle was naked on the bed, a fifth of bourbon between her legs, screaming and throwing whatever was handy at her husband. John Fante went to Faulkner's aid, pulled him into the living room, and then returned to assist Bizzarrides. Estelle was on her feet now, swinging her bottle at Bizzarrides. The two men subdued her, covered her nakedness with a sheet. At least now, for the moment, everything was under control. Then, the drunk and angry William Faulkner returned to the bedroom, and the battle commenced again. Estelle flung the sheet aside, emptied her bottle of bourbon onto the mattress, grabbed a box of matches, and screamed, "You leave here, you little prick, and I'll burn it to the ground." "I'm going to work," slurred Faulkner. "I told them I'd be there, and I made a commitment, and I'm going to keep it." No sooner had the words escaped his lips than Estelle struck a match, and the bed was in flames. "You shit," she screamed and laughed, dancing naked on the bed. "Now go to work. Have a swell fucking day."
She's got one from me. She's getting married on Saturday.
One more poem if I can find it.
Very overrated.
I'm looking at a new light now. That's pretty awesome.
Here we go. Okay. Last but not least. I bought a car today, my old one, the one that carried me through brokenness and depression and attempted suicide for years, complaining but faithful as a wet, stinking old dog that would never give up or go home. Finally sprung an oil leak to go with the struts in the master cylinder and the radiator that needed immediate attention 18 months ago. The smell of gasoline was making my passengers choke at every stoplight, and my new wife decreed that she would not ride in the beast ever again.
So we stopped at a used car lot, and I found a shiny 3-year-old Redwood. I always buy red whenever possible. And I said goodbye, and the salesman watched me as I put my hand on her trunk and patted her. "Goodbye, old car," I said. "You saved my ass over and over and never quit on me." Through the showroom window, she was smiling, my new wife, my approving, happy co-signer. It was then that I grasped an immutable truth. Wives come and go, but a good used car is a treasure. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Thanks to the King Eddy.
Breakout.
I